The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, casting a sterile glow over the store. Ben Foster leaned against the counter, absently drumming his fingers on the register. Another slow shift. His first week on the job was uneventful so far, but uneventful didn't mean easy. The endless cycle of customers, scanning barcodes, and feigning polite smiles was exhausting, but at least it was a paycheck. One he desperately needed. The bell above the entrance jingled, pulling Ben from his thoughts. He glanced up to see a young woman walk in, clutching a baby close to her chest. She couldn't have been more than 18, her movements careful and deliberate, as though every step cost her a piece of herself. The infant in her arms squirmed, letting out a soft whimper that echoed faintly through the aisles. Ben's gaze lingered for a moment before he looked away, focusing on tidying the counter. He wasn't one to pry into other people's lives, but something about her caught his attention. Maybe it was the dark circles under her eyes, or the way she clung to the baby like it was the only thing grounding her. Minutes passed as she moved through the aisles, her pace slow and hesitant. Ben noticed how her eyes flicked over price tags with a mix of anxiety and longing. She stopped in the baby aisle, her gaze locking onto a shelf stocked with diapers and formula. From behind the counter, Ben watched as she reached for a pack of diapers, only to freeze midway. Her hand trembled slightly before pulling back. She glanced at the baby formula next, picking up a can and staring at it for what felt like an eternity. Her shoulders slumped as she placed the formula in her basket and turned toward the register, leaving the diapers behind. Ben's heart sank. He could see the choice she had made, a choice no parent should have to face. As she approached the counter, he greeted her with a soft smile. "Hi, how's your day going?" She didn't meet his eyes. "Fine," she mumbled, though her voice betrayed her. She placed the can of formula on the counter, her hands clutching the edge of the basket, as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. Ben scanned the can, his mind racing. He knew the policy. Employees weren't allowed to intervene in customers' purchases. But as he glanced back at the baby aisle, the abandoned pack of diapers weighed heavily on his conscience. "Just the formula?" he asked, his tone gentle. She nodded, avoiding his gaze. "Yeah, just that." Ben hesitated, his fingers hovering over the register. "You sure about the diapers?" Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with alarm. I can't afford both," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. The admission seemed to cost her more than money ever could. Without a second thought, Ben reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He didn't have much to spare. His bank account was dangerously close to empty. But that didn't matter. Swiping his card, he motioned toward the pack of diapers still sitting on the shelf. "Go grab them," he said. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment she didn't move. I can't let you do that." "You're not letting me do anything," Ben replied with a small smile. "I'm just helping." The woman hesitated before rushing back to the aisle. When she returned with the diapers, her hands were shaking. She placed them on the counter, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't have to," Ben said, sliding the bag across the counter. "Just take care of yourself and your baby, okay?" As she left, the weight of her gratitude hung in the air, almost tangible. Ben watched her go, the sight of her walking out into the chilly evening with her baby cradled close filling him with a quiet sense of satisfaction. But not everyone in the store shared his sentiment. "She could have been lying, you know," a man in line grumbled, crossing his arms. "These people play the sympathy card all the time." Ben felt his stomach churn, but he didn't respond. Another customer, an older woman, chimed in. "He's just a kid himself. Probably doesn't know better." The murmurs grew louder, a chorus of judgment that made Ben's cheeks flush. He focused on scanning the next customer's items, pretending not to hear. But the truth was, their words stung. That night, as Ben closed the store, his manager, Mr. Carter, called him into the office. The fluorescent light flickered overhead as Ben sat across from the older man, who wore a grim expression. "I heard about what happened today," Mr. Carter began, his tone flat. Ben tensed. "If this is about the diapers—" "It is," Mr. Carter interrupted. "Ben, you know the policy. Employees aren't allowed to interfere with customer purchases. What you did is commendable, but it's a violation of store rules." Ben's heart sank. "I was just trying to help." "I understand," Mr. Carter said, his tone softening slightly. "But rules are rules." "I'm sorry, Ben. but I have to let you go." The words hit like a punch to the gut. Ben sat there, stunned, as Mr. Carter slid an envelope across the desk. "This is your final paycheck," the manager said. "Good luck, kid." Ben left the office in a daze. By the time he got home, the reality of his situation began to sink in. He sat at his desk, staring at the envelope in his hands. He thought about the woman and her baby, about the pack of diapers and the quiet "thank you" she had whispered as she left. Was it worth it? Losing his job over a small act of kindness? He didn't know. But as he scribbled down ideas for his next steps, a new job, maybe a fresh start, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had done the right thing. The days after Ben lost his job passed in a haze. He spent his mornings scrolling through job listings, afternoons filling out applications, and evenings wondering how he'd make it through the month. His savings, already thin, were dwindling fast. But no matter how hard things seemed, he kept reminding himself of that young mother's face, the tears of gratitude in her eyes. It was worth it, he told himself, even if it didn't feel that way right now. A week later, Ben was walking through the local park, a notebook in hand. He'd been jotting down ideas for jobs he might be qualified for, but nothing seemed promising. The late afternoon sun bathed the park in a golden glow, and the crisp autumn air carried the faint scent of fallen leaves. He stopped at a bench near the playground, watching children chase each other around while their parents chatted nearby. As he flipped through his notebook, his thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Mr. Foster." Ben looked up, startled. Standing a few feet away was the same man he had seen in the store a week ago, the older gentleman who had come in just after the young mother. Ben remembered the man's sharp suit and dignified air, a stark contrast to the casual shoppers around him. Today he looked just as polished, his silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. "Yes, that's me," Ben replied cautiously, rising to his feet. The man smiled warmly and extended a hand. "Henry Harris. We didn't get a chance to speak properly last time, but I've been hoping to run into you again." Ben shook his hand. Confusion etched on his face. "You've been looking for me?" Harris nodded. "Yes. I wasn't sure I'd find you, but I had to try. I wanted to thank you for what you did that day." Ben blinked. "Thank me? For what?" "For helping my daughter," Harris said, his voice softening. Ben's mind raced. His daughter. Realization dawned. "You mean the young woman with the baby? That was your daughter." Harris nodded, his expression tinged with pride and sorrow. "Her name is Maria. And the baby, her son, is my grandson, Jacob. She didn't tell me about what happened at the store until later, but when I found out, well, I knew I had to find you." Ben shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't do anything special," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "I just saw someone who needed help." Harris's gaze was steady. "You did more than that, Mr. Foster. You gave her hope when she thought she had none. You treated her with kindness and dignity, something she hasn't experienced much of since her circumstances changed." Ben didn't know how to respond. He glanced down at his notebook, suddenly feeling self-conscious. Harris seemed to sense his discomfort. "I won't keep you long," he said. "But my daughter wanted to thank you herself. She asked me to invite you to our home." Ben hesitated. The idea of meeting Maria again, of stepping into a stranger's home, felt daunting. But there was something earnest in Harris's eyes, something that made it hard to refuse. I guess I could come by," Ben said finally. Harris's face lit up. "Wonderful. How about tomorrow evening? Around 7. Ben nodded, and Harris handed him a business card with an address printed in neat, bold letters. "I'll see you then," Harris said, giving Ben a firm handshake before walking away. The next evening, Ben found himself standing outside an impressive estate. The house was massive, its white columns and perfectly manicured lawn giving it an air of timeless elegance. Ben adjusted his shirt, suddenly hyper-aware of his scuffed sneakers and thrift store jeans. He rang the doorbell, and a few moments later, the door opened to reveal a woman in her early 20s. She had the same dark eyes and delicate features as Harris, but there was a weariness about her, a vulnerability that made her seem older than her years. "Mr. Foster," she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Just Ben is fine," he said with a nervous smile. She stepped aside to let him in. "I'm Maria. Please come in." The grand foyer was stunning, with marble floors and a chandelier that sparkled like a constellation. Ben tried not to gawk as Maria led him into a cozy sitting room. There, on a plush sofa, sat baby Jacob, cooing softly as he played with a stuffed bear. Maria gestured for Ben to sit. "I don't even know where to begin," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. "What you did for me, for Jacob. I can't thank you enough." "You don't have to thank me," Ben said quickly. "I just did what anyone would do." Maria shook her head. "No, you didn't. Most people would have looked the other way. But you didn't. You saw me struggling and you stepped in. That meant more to me than you'll ever know." Her words left Ben feeling both humbled and uncomfortable. I've been where you are," he admitted after a moment. "Not with a baby, but I know what it's like to need help and not know how to ask for it." Maria's eyes softened. "Then you understand why your kindness meant so much to me." Before Ben could respond, Harris entered the room, carrying a slim envelope. He handed it to Ben with a small smile. "This is for you," Harris said. Ben opened the envelope, his breath catching when he saw what was inside. A stack of bills, far more than the cost of diapers. This is too much," Ben stammered. Harris placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's not just for the diapers. Think of it as a way to cover your college expenses. Or whatever you need to get back on your feet." Ben's hands trembled as he held the envelope. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," Harris said. "And there's one more thing." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "You've lost your job, but I'd like to offer you something better. A position at my company. You've shown integrity and compassion, qualities we value deeply. If you're willing, there's a place for you." Ben stared at the card, his mind racing. A job? At a real company? It didn't seem possible. I don't know what to say," he murmured. Harris smiled. "Say yes." Maria nodded, her eyes warm. "Please, Ben. You deserve this." Ben looked at them, at baby Jacob, and then back at the card in his hand. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "Kindness will come back to you, Ben. It may take time, but it always finds its way back." For the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. "I'll do it," he said finally, his voice steady. Harris's smile widened. "Welcome aboard." The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Ben's modest apartment, highlighting the sparse furnishings and the stack of unopened bills on the counter. For the first time in weeks, he felt lighter. The previous evening's events played on a loop in his mind. Harris's offer, Maria's gratitude, and the unexpected turn his life had taken. He had gone to bed feeling overwhelmed but hopeful, and as he got ready for the day, that hope blossomed into determination. The card Harris had given him lay on the table, the bold, embossed lettering seeming to beckon him. Harris and Company. Enterprises. Integrity. Innovation. Impact. Ben knew little about the company other than its reputation as a successful and philanthropic organization. The prospect of working there felt daunting, but it also stirred something in him, a long-buried ambition to make something of himself, to prove he was capable of more than just scraping by. After a quick breakfast of toast and instant coffee, he dialed the number on the card. "Good morning," a cheerful voice answered. "Harris and Company. Enterprises. How may I assist you?" "Hi. This is Ben Foster. Mr. Harris asked me to call about a position." The assistant's tone brightened further. "Oh, yes? Mr. Harris mentioned you. Let me connect you with HR to get everything set up." Moments later, Ben was speaking with a woman named Elaine, who outlined the details of his new role, an entry-level position in the operations department with opportunities for growth. She scheduled his orientation for the following Monday and emailed him a list of documents to bring. As Ben hung up, he couldn't help but smile. This was really happening. When Monday arrived, Ben found himself standing in front of Harris and Company's sleek, glass-panel building. The sight of it was almost intimidating, a stark contrast to the part-time jobs and struggling businesses he had worked for in the past. Inside, the lobby was bustling with activity. Employees in tailored suits moved with purpose, their conversations a hum of innovation and collaboration. A receptionist directed Ben to the 15th floor, where he was greeted by Elaine, a kind woman in her 40s with a warm smile and an impressive stack of paperwork. "Welcome aboard, Ben," she said, handing him a folder. "You'll find everything you need in here, your schedule, your ID badge, and some light reading about company policies. Don't worry, orientation isn't as scary as it sounds." Ben chuckled nervously. "Thanks. I appreciate that. Elaine led him to a conference room where a group of new hires had already gathered. Ben took a seat near the back, listening as a manager named Peter walked them through the company's history, values, and mission. "Here at Harris & Company, we believe in making a difference," Peter said, his voice steady and inspiring. "We're not just about profits. We're about people. Our employees, our clients, and the communities we serve. Every one of you is here because you bring something unique to the table, and we're excited to see what you'll achieve." For the first time in a long while, Ben felt like he belonged. Over the next few weeks, Ben settled into his new role. The work was challenging but fulfilling, and his coworkers were welcoming and supportive. He quickly gained a reputation for his strong work ethic and problem-solving skills, earning the respect of both his peers and supervisors. Harris checked in on him periodically, always with a word of encouragement or advice. "Remember, Ben," he said one afternoon, "success isn't just about climbing the ladder. It's about lifting others as you go." Those words stuck with Ben, reminding him of the kindness that had brought him here. Outside of work, he stayed in touch with Maria. She often called to check on him, sometimes just to share stories about Jacob's latest milestones. Their conversations became a source of comfort, a reminder of the connection that had sparked this new chapter in his life. One evening, Maria invited him over for dinner. It was a casual affair, just spaghetti and garlic bread, but it felt special nonetheless. As they ate, they talked about their hopes and dreams, their struggles and triumphs. "You've been through a lot," Maria said, her voice tinged with admiration. "Most people would have given up, but you kept going." Ben shrugged, his gaze dropping to his plate. "I guess I didn't know how to quit. But honestly, I think you're the strong one. Raising Jacob on your own, rebuilding your life, that takes real courage." Maria smiled, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Maybe we're both stronger than we realize." Just as things were beginning to fall into place, Ben's world was shaken by unexpected news. Late one Friday afternoon, Harris called him into his office. "Ben," he began, his tone serious but calm, "we've run into a situation with one of our community projects. A key partner has backed out at the last minute, and we're at risk of falling short on a major commitment." Ben leaned forward, his brow furrowing. "How can I help?" Harris smiled faintly. "That's what I was hoping you'd say. I need someone who can think on their feet, someone who understands the importance of this work. I'd like you to step in and help us find a solution." Ben's heart raced. The project Harris described was far outside his usual responsibilities, but the trust Harris was placing in him was undeniable. "I'll do my best," he said, determination flickering in his eyes. Over the next several days, Ben threw himself into the project, working late nights and early mornings to secure new partnerships and resources. Maria offered her unwavering support, often calling to check on him or dropping by with home-cooked meals to keep him going. By the end of the week, Ben's efforts paid off. The project was back on track, and Harris couldn't have been prouder. "You've exceeded my expectations, Ben," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You're not just an employee here. You're a leader." That night, as Ben sat in his apartment, he reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. The boy who once felt lost and uncertain was now carving out a future he could be proud of. His mother's words echoed in his mind once more. "Kindness will come back to you, Ben. It may take time, but it always finds its way back." He smiled, knowing she had been right all along. The days following Ben's triumph with the project felt like a whirlwind. His work was gaining recognition, and it seemed like every time he turned around, there was another challenge to face. But with each hurdle, he found himself growing stronger and more confident. No longer the man who had once struggled to get by, but someone who could rise to meet whatever came his way. Ben's reputation at Harris & Company was beginning to precede him. People who had once seen him as just another entry-level worker were now starting to approach him for advice and guidance. It was a strange feeling to be looked to for answers when just a few months ago he had been the one asking the questions. Yet it wasn't just his career that was changing. His relationship with Maria was evolving too. The bond they shared had grown deeper over time, and it was clear they had both come to rely on each other for support. But as the days passed, Ben began to notice something more than friendship simmering beneath the surface, something that both excited and terrified him. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Ben's phone buzzed with a text message from Maria. "Can we talk tonight? I need to tell you something," His heart skipped a beat. What could it be? He had learned to never overthink messages from her. Maria had always been a straight shooter. But this one felt different. He quickly texted back, "Sure, I'll be at your place around 7. When he arrived at her apartment later that evening, Maria greeted him with a soft smile, but there was a nervous energy about her that caught his attention. "Hey, Ben," she said, leading him into the living room. "I'm glad you came." Ben could tell something was on her mind, and he took a seat, his gaze locked on her. "What's going on? You've got that look." Maria laughed nervously, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something important." Ben's curiosity deepened, but he kept his tone light. "Okay, hit me with it. What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath, then looked him in the eye. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about our friendship, and how much it's meant to me. But lately I've started to realize something. I think I might want more than just friendship." The words hung in the air like a quiet storm. Ben's mind raced, his pulse quickening as he processed what she had just said. Was she saying what he thought she was saying? He had always admired Maria, not just for her strength and resilience, but for the kindness she had shown him when no one else would. The idea of being with her, of sharing something deeper than friendship, both thrilled and terrified him. "I don't know what to say," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. Maria seemed to soften, her expression unreadable. "I didn't want to complicate things between us, but I also didn't want to keep pretending like I didn't feel this way. I just needed to tell you." Ben swallowed hard, his heart thudding in his chest. He had never been one to open up easily, but there was something about Maria, about the way she made him feel understood, that made him want to be vulnerable. "I felt the same way," he confessed, his voice steady now. "But I've been too scared to say it. I didn't want to risk ruining what we have." Maria smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Well, I guess we're both in the same boat then." The air between them seemed to shift, the weight of unspoken feelings lifting. For the first time in a long time, Ben felt like the future wasn't just an uncertain blur. It felt like something he could shape, something he could build, with Maria by his side. As Ben's personal life took an unexpected turn, his professional life was also blossoming. The success of the community project had opened doors for him within Harris & Company, and soon, he was entrusted with even more responsibility. One afternoon, Harris called him into his office, a serious look on his face. "Ben, I've been watching your progress over the past few months," Harris began. "Your initiative and problem-solving skills are exactly what we need here. We've got a new project coming up, and I'd like to put you in charge of it." Ben blinked in surprise. "Me? Are you sure I'm ready for that?" Harris nodded. "Absolutely. You've proven yourself. I know it won't be easy, but I think you're the right person for the job." The project was a large-scale corporate social responsibility initiative aimed at revitalizing a neighborhood in need of development. Ben would be leading a team of engineers, designers, and community outreach specialists to help turn the vision into reality. It was the type of challenge Ben had always dreamed of, a chance to prove his abilities on a grand scale. As Ben walked out of Harris's office, a rush of excitement and anxiety surged through him. He had never led a project of this magnitude before, but he couldn't back down now. He had come too far. A growing team. In the days that followed, Ben threw himself into the new project. He worked late into the evenings, meeting with his team to map out a plan and assign roles. The project was massive, involving everything from construction and design to fundraising and public relations. It felt like the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. But Ben was determined to make it work. He quickly found that leadership wasn't just about giving orders. It was about listening, understanding, and inspiring others to share in the vision. His team quickly warmed to him, appreciating his down-to-earth style and willingness to roll up his sleeves and dive into the work. One of the team members, a woman named Susan, approached him one afternoon after a particularly long meeting. "You know," she said, "I've been working at Harris & Company for a while, and I've never seen someone take on a project like this with so much heart. It's inspiring." Ben smiled, grateful for the compliment. "Thanks, Susan. Honestly, I'm just trying to do my best. But I couldn't do it without a team like this." Despite the success at work, Ben's personal life was not without its struggles. The relationship between him and Maria, though still strong, had its challenges. They had to navigate the delicate balance between friendship and something more, each of them unsure how to proceed without jeopardizing the connection they had built. One evening, after a long day of work, Ben found himself on the phone with Maria, discussing the project and their lives in general. "I think I'm losing myself in all of this," Ben admitted. "The project, the new responsibilities, sometimes it feels like I'm forgetting what really matters." Maria's voice was gentle but firm. "Don't forget about you, Ben. It's easy to get caught up in everything else, but you have to take care of yourself, too. And that includes us." Ben was silent for a moment, reflecting on her words. "I know. I'm just trying to do everything right, for everyone." "You don't have to do it all, Ben. We're in this together." The reassurance in her voice brought him a sense of peace. He didn't have to navigate this journey alone. As the weeks went by, Ben continued to balance his personal life and his professional growth. The project began to take shape, and with each passing day, he could see the fruits of his labor coming to life. He was no longer just a man struggling to make ends meet. He was someone with a purpose, with a future. Maria was there, too, cheering him on every step of the way. They had found their rhythm, learning to navigate the complexities of their relationship while continuing to support each other's dreams. One night, after a successful meeting with a key partner for the project, Ben stood on the rooftop of his apartment building, looking out at the city skyline. It was a moment of reflection, a moment to appreciate how far he had come. From the boy who had once believed kindness was a luxury he could never afford, to the man who was now shaping a future he could be proud of. Ben had no idea what the future would hold, but for the first time in his life he felt ready to face it. As the weeks turned into months, Ben's life had taken on a steady rhythm. His work on the community revitalization project had been nothing short of transformative. His leadership had inspired those around him, and the project was beginning to show signs of success. People from all over the city were noticing the changes in the neighborhood, and it felt like Ben's dream was finally becoming a reality. But little did he know, life had another curveball in store for him. It was a crisp autumn morning when Ben received a call that would change everything. He had just wrapped up a meeting with his team and was heading to lunch when his phone rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something in his gut told him to answer. "Mr. Foster, this is Allison Bennett from the corporate board of Harris & Company. I hope you're doing well." Ben's heart skipped a beat. Allison Bennett? Why was she calling him? He had heard of her. She was high up in the company, a key decision-maker. "I'm doing well, thank you," Ben said cautiously. "What can I do for you?" "I'm calling to inform you that there's been a sudden shift in direction at Harris & Company. The board has decided to reassess some of our ongoing projects, and, unfortunately, the revitalization project you've been working on is going to be placed on hold." Ben felt a wave of confusion wash over him. "What do you mean on hold? We've made so much progress. This project is making a real difference." "I understand, Mr. Foster, but corporate decisions are out of my hands. The project will be paused, and the funds allocated will be redistributed to other ventures." Ben was silent for a long moment, processing what she had just said. The project he had poured his heart and soul into, along with the community that had rallied behind it, was now being cast aside. He had given everything to this cause, and now, in one swift decision, it seemed like it might all come crashing down. "Is there anything I can do?" Ben asked, his voice tight with frustration. "I'm afraid not," Allison said, her tone apologetic but firm. "It's out of our hands." As the call ended, Ben stood frozen, his phone still pressed to his ear. His chest tightened as the weight of the situation hit him. He had worked so hard to build something meaningful, to prove himself in a world that had never given him much. And now, in an instant, it seemed like everything was slipping through his fingers. Later that night, Ben sat alone in his apartment, staring blankly at the wall. The uncertainty of the future gnawed at him. Maria had been supportive, of course, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed. He had promised the community that their voices would be heard, that their lives would be better. And now he couldn't even keep that promise. Maria found him sitting in the dim light of his living room, his face drawn and weary. She didn't need to ask what was wrong. The look on his face said it all. "Ben, talk to me," she said softly, sitting beside him. I don't know what to do," he muttered, his voice cracking. "The project's been cancelled. All the work we've done, all the progress, it's just gone. I thought this was my chance, Maria, to prove I could make a difference. And now I feel like I've let everyone down. Maria reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. You didn't let anyone down, Ben. You did what you could, and you made a difference. That's what matters. Ben shook his head, pulling away slightly. It's not enough. I promised them something. And now I'm failing them. I'm failing you. Maria's expression softened. Her eyes filled with understanding. You're not failing anyone. You've done everything you could. But sometimes, Ben, life throws us curveballs. And you can't control everything. What you can control is how you respond. Ben looked at her, her words settling into his chest like a bomb. But despite her reassurance, a part of him still felt lost. He had given so much, sacrificed so much, and now it felt like it had all been in vain. He leaned back against the couch, his thoughts spiraling. It was a week later when Ben received an unexpected letter. The envelope was thick and embossed with the official seal of Harris and Company. He didn't know what to expect, but his fingers trembled as he tore it open. The letter was short and to the point, but it held a message that would change everything once again. Dear Mr. Foster, we are pleased to inform you that, due to your exemplary leadership on the Community Revitalization Project, the board has decided to reverse its decision to halt the initiative. Not only that, but we have chosen to fully fund the project moving forward, and we would like to offer you a permanent position as the Senior Project Director. Your dedication to the community and your unwavering commitment to seeing this through has impressed us all. We look forward to working with you as we continue to bring this vision to life. Ben read the letter 3 times, his mind struggling to process the words. Had he read it correctly? This couldn't be real. He rushed to Maria's apartment, the letter still in his hand, his heart racing with excitement. When she opened the door, she saw the look on his face and immediately knew something had changed. Ben, what is it? Without a word, he handed her the letter. She scanned it quickly, her eyes widening with disbelief. They reversed the decision? They're funding the project again? She asked, almost in a whisper. Ben nodded, unable to contain the grin spreading across his face. They are. And they've offered me a permanent position as the Senior Project Director. It's real, Maria. It's really happening. Maria's face lit up, and she threw her arms around him in an exuberant hug. This is incredible, Ben. You did it. Ben held her tightly, the weight of the past few months finally lifting from his shoulders. We did it, he corrected softly. The next few months were a blur of activity. With the project back on track, Ben poured everything he had into it. But this time, he wasn't just working for a paycheck or for validation. He was working for something bigger than himself, the chance to make a real, lasting impact on the lives of the people he had promised to help. Maria was by his side every step of the way, her unwavering support giving him the strength he needed to face the challenges ahead. And as the project gained momentum, so did their relationship. What had once been a quiet, tentative bond between two people had blossomed into something deeper, more meaningful. The project was completed a year later, an overwhelming success. The neighborhood that had once been forgotten was now a thriving community, filled with hope and opportunity. Ben stood in the heart of it, surrounded by the people whose lives had been changed. He could hardly believe it. He had done it. And just when it seemed like everything had come full circle, a final twist awaited him. As he looked around at the faces of the people he had worked so hard for, a familiar figure walked up to him. It was Harris. You've done more than I ever could have imagined, Ben, Harris said, his voice full of pride. This project is a testament to your vision and leadership. I'm proud to have you on my team. Ben looked at him, his chest swelling with gratitude. I couldn't have done it without the support of my team and you? Harris smiled, his eyes glinting with a hint of mischief. Well, you know, Ben, there's one more surprise in store for you. Ben raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? Let's just say, we've got something big planned. The work you've done here, it's caught the attention of some very influential people. I'm offering you a seat at the board of directors of Harris and Company. Ben's jaw dropped. He had never expected this. From a struggling man just trying to get by to now being offered a position that would shape the company's future, it felt like a dream. I don't know what to say, Ben stammered, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. You don't have to say anything, Ben. Just know that you've earned it. As Ben stood there, gazing out at the thriving neighborhood, he realized that his journey had come full circle. What had begun as a simple act of kindness had led him to a future beyond anything he could have imagined. And as for the project, it wasn't just a success, it was a legacy, a testament to the power of resilience, compassion, and the unexpected twists of fate. But as Ben walked away from the meeting with Harris, a small slip of paper fell from his pocket. It was the letter from Allison Bennett, the one he had received weeks earlier, stating that the project had been cancelled. He looked at it for a moment, and then, with a sense of finality, he crumpled it in his hand. It wasn't the letter that mattered anymore. It was the journey, the people he had helped, the life he had built, and the unexpected twists that had brought him here. And for the first time in his life, Ben Foster knew one thing for certain. Kindness had a way of coming back around when you least expected it.